Hey guys, you may recall I recently picked up this reconditioned Ryobi miter saw, and I mentioned it was for an upcoming project. Well, I think I better start on that project real soon before the weather gets too cold. So, what is this project? Well, I've got a lot of these Motorola 7-inch sets. So much so I've got 3 out on the back porch, a couple more stuck in closets, and the rest scattered around. I also have a bunch of Admiral 7-inch sets, which are just about the same size. Now, one thing I do have in my small, cramped apartment is ceiling height. My ceilings are over 9 feet tall because I live in a rather old building. I'm on the back porch right now, which is also kind of an interesting structure in that it seems to be it was built for an external wall originally, and then they built this back porch, which is totally enclosed. But this will give you some idea of the ceiling height I'm talking about, I think. So these windows are very, very tall windows. So, I did a video, I think a couple years ago, where I bought a ready-made, a kit, shelving system. I got it at a home improvement center. But that was meant more for garages. Although it is very sturdy, it's kind of ugly. It's made out of steel. And the sizing, the width, and whatnot is not ideal for TVs. Here's what I'm talking about. Now, it's pretty good for TVs in terms of depth, especially for these bigger sets. But for the Motorola sets, the width is terrible because it's just a little too narrow to fit a third set in, and with only 2 sets, it's wasting a lot of space. And is deeper than it needs to be. As I said, kind of ugly. It's just black painted steel with some like masonite shelves. And even for the larger sets, it's still wasting some space. And I got some extra ceiling height that's being wasted. Also, the corner I have this set in right now, it's got a bit of a jog because there's a chimney here. And it's not pushed back as far as it could go, so I'm wasting space in this inaccessible corner back here. So what I decided to do is, I'm never going to find a shelving system that's optimal for, say, these Motorola sets, so why don't I just build one? I figure, with the height of the ceilings I've got, if I build a system where each shelf is about this spacing, I can get 9, 10, maybe even 11 sets if I go all the way up to the ceiling. Now, I don't need quite that many. I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4... 5 Motorola sets, plus a 6th. So I've got a blonde, that's actually walnut, and the mahogany on the back porch, and that Bakelite, and that Bakelite, and that Bakelite for sure I want to put on the shelving system. So it's at 1, 2, 3, so that's 6. I've got a couple more in storage that are portable suitcase sets that I may want to display, maybe not. But if not those, then the Admiral sets. So see how this Admiral set's basically the same dimensions as the Motorola sets. And I've got this wood version and 1 or 2 Bakelite versions of that. So in other words, I've got a bunch of sets that are essentially the same size. So now for building the shelving system. I set a couple criteria for myself. 1, fairly inexpensive. 2, look halfway decent. 3, be easy to build. So I don't have an elaborate woodworking setup. I don't have a table saw or a joiner or anything like that. So I want to use dimension off-the-shelf timber. Now my first thought, when I went and saw that they had 8-foot long 2x2s, was to get 4 of those and maybe a bunch of sheets of this birch plywood. And then either cut notches in this or cut notches out of that, maybe use some little L brackets, and just set up a bunch of these shelves. Which would work, wouldn't be the most attractive thing, but then I got to thinking that, 1, these I think were $6 or $7 each. If I want to get like 8 of them, it's a little expensive. Got a lot of little fiddly cuts if I want to make notches in here, cut the corners out of here, and put little brackets or glue blocks or something. That gets tedious. But also I would have to cut these down, because if I go with this, which is 2x2, it's really overkill. which means I'll be wasting space again, because my fourth criteria, I guess, would be I want it to be as space efficient as possible. I don't have a table saw, as I said, to make nice straight long cuts to rip these down. Also, it occurred to me, I don't need full shelves. I'm not going to put little knickknacks on here. I just need to support some TVs. I just have 4 feet. So all I really need to do is support it at those key locations, or even let the feet float and just have a couple pieces of wood under the rectangular square cabinet just to support it. So in other words, I don't need all this material. I just need some, even like an X. Imagine this, instead of a shelf, it's a full sheet of wood, just like an X, and the set just sits on top of that. So I started looking at, could I build something like that fairly easily? First I thought about, again, going with the 2x2s, and maybe going with some 1x1s, or 1x2s, and cutting notches or miters or something, and building kind of just a framework. And the sets themselves will basically form the shelves. But that seemed kind of fiddly to do too. Plus the 2x2s are a little expensive if you want to get good quality wood. Like a 2x2 mahogany, I don't know, $30, $40, something like that. But the 1x2s are a lot cheaper. And it occurred to me that if you go with 1x2s instead of 2x2s, everything fits together nicely. So imagine if I go 1x2 and cut another one down, and then I take 1x1s, hey, they fit in there perfectly. So imagine I took a couple 1x1s and put them like that, and then put another piece of 1x2 on top of it, and then glue this all together. It would kind of have the illusion of it being a 2x2 with a notch cut out and then some pieces of timber set in there. But I'm not entirely sure these are so strong. These are really, the actual dimensions of these is 3/4 by 3/4, or they call them 1x1s, just like these aren't really 1x2s, they're 3/4 by 1.5. But the only thing you can get these in is poplar, whereas this is mahogany. If you go to 1x2s or bigger, you can get all kinds of wood. What I really wanted to get was like walnut and maple to make a nice offset of colors, but cost-wise, it was more practical to go with mahogany. So I got a bunch of mahogany. I got 4 of the straightest, cleanest looking 1x2s, 8 foot long, and then I got some smaller pieces I figure I can chop up. This is actually oak, just using it for a demonstration here. So figured I'll use the 8 foot long ones for the main support, and then cut up a bunch of pieces of other mahogany to form the spacing. Now, what I'm stuck on is, do I want to use a couple of 1x1s? And I can't really do the X, like I just mentioned. That's a little too more work than I want to do. I'd have to cut them off at 45-degree angles and fit it in there somehow. But I'll just go at 90-degree angles. I think it'll look all right. Plus, I'm not going to make this square. I'm going to make it full width, of course, to hold the TV. But front to back, there's no need for it to go all the way from here to here. It can just go from like here to here. And imagine there's a piece of wood going across here and maybe here underneath the set to support it. It'd be nice if I lined up the pieces of wood exactly where the feet are, but I don't think the feet are going to be exactly in the same position on every set, but I'll give it a shot. So now what I'm toying with is, instead of using 1x1s, to use 1x2s as well, because I can put these in like so and like so. So imagine that this is essentially the shelf. Put one of these like every 8 or 10 inches for the sets, down the whole length of a 8 foot long piece of timber. And then to put the two sides together, do something like this, maybe 3 or 4 spaced down the whole length of it. Now, this may be a little tough to follow, but I do have a bunch of little basswood and balsa wood, like a hobby pack of little pieces of wood, so I think maybe I'll glue together a little mock assembly, a little prototype of what I'm talking about. I think it'll help you all visualize this, and myself as well, if I build a little model. So imagine these are the 1x2s. I'll cut these up and glue them together and make a little prototype model. here's what I came up with. It's not done, but it illustrates the basic ideas of what I'm aiming towards. So imagine these wood blocks are the TVs. So each one of these is a shelf. So this would be the front view, say, and see it's wider than it is deep. So these sets are about 18 inches wide, I think, so maybe I'll go 22 inches wide on the opening, so you get a couple, 3-4 inches on either side of the sets. And I intentionally want it to be not as deep as it is wide, so the sets can overhang a bit. I think it'll be nice to have the fronts protrude a bit rather than having them recessed. Make them easier to see and to operate. So, imagine this is another set. I just slide them in like so. And I figure I won't need anywhere near as many supports on the sides. I figure for sure one at the top and the bottom, and maybe a couple more spaced throughout. And then here are those 1x2s that I'll have going this way rather than this way. I think they'll be plenty strong enough because with the edges of the set so close to the vertical pieces, most of the weight's going to be right on the joint here, not in the middle. So I don't see any reason why these horizontal pieces would deflect down. Plus, with them going this way, it gives more of a surface for the sets to sit on. And if I do this right, the feet on the set should sit on these, or at least I think I'll try for that. Not all the sets are going to be identical, so some may or may not line up. Also, the feet are fairly close to the front and backs of the sets, so I might not get the overhang effect I want, but that's okay. If the cabinet of the set rests directly on the wood and the feet are just kind of hanging in free space, that's alright. I could even put a little bit of felt padding or something on the wooden pieces. So that's the basic idea there. Now something else. So now all that remains is to turn this pile of lumber into something that resembles this. And to help me out a little bit, I purchased an upgraded saw blade for my new Ryobi miter saw. This came with a 24 tooth blade, kinda coarse teeth, whereas this has 60. And they're finer, so I hope this will do a much better job making those cross cuts. I did some tests with the blade that's in there now, and it had a little bit of tear out. This was the best blade I could find in my local home improvement center, so I hope it'll work out better. So, I want to finish off a few other things before I get to this, but be looking for it sometime this fall.